Can you talk about the latest in Egypt right now, Hossein?
Sure. The situation remains unchanged. Unfortunately, we had a fresh round of killings on Sunday of this week. More violence is expected as both sides continue with their zero-sum approach to this political crisis. There are talks that there are perhaps mediation efforts at reaching a compromise or a solution to the current political crisis. The problem, of course, from a human rights perspective is that the security forces, the police, appear to have been given the green light to kill just as many people as necessary and round up any number of people in order to break this the protests of the pro-Morsi supporters. Right now, of course, we're not optimistic that there's going to be any serious attempt at holding the perpetrators of these worst incidents of mass killing in Egyptian history accountable. There has been no accountability for the Mubarak-era killings, for the military transition rule that followed him, or for killing of protesters under Morsi himself during the Muslim Brotherhood rule. And now with the military back in power and with the judiciary almost completely in support of the new military-backed government, the hopes for accountability for those unnecessary deaths are even dimmer.
But this whole idea of bringing Morsi to trial now, when the reality is he's been basically held incommunicado. I mean, how can anyone in the international community expect that there will be any kind of fair judicial process under the conditions of this coup and this basically disappearance of Egypt's elected president?
Yes. There are two issues of concern here. One, of course, is the refusal to disclose the location where the former president is held, the refusal to allow him visits by his lawyers and his family members. He's not technically disappeared because he was allowed a visit from Catherine Ashton, the EU foreign policy chief, and from an African Union panel. So the military effectively allowed these visits as well as visits by two selected human rights workers in order to prove that legally speaking he is not disappeared, that the state is taking responsibility for his detention but refusing for security reasons to disclose his location. Having said that, of course, he is denied due process rights, the rights of a prisoner to have access to family visits, medical visits, and to a lawyer of his choice. The second concern here is the selective prosecution, and from a human rights perspective, again, we believe that former President Morsi should be prosecuted. He should be held accountable for crimes that he authored during his 1 year in office. He did praise the police and order them to kill protesters. In January, he did, of course, allow his supporters to set up effectively a torture camp for his opponents outside the gates of the presidential palace, among many other human rights violations. And we're not talking about governance failures. Now we're talking about recognizable criminal offense that he, through commission or omission, allowed during his 1 year in office. But the kind of prosecutions that we're seeing is, of course, completely selective and punitive, and it makes no sense for any observer to see Morsi being prosecuted and about to stand trial, as you said, on November 1st for having allowed the killing or incited the killing of 10 protesters when 1,000 protesters were killed on August 14th, and there isn't even an investigation into it.